Yeah, you already know it's you already know it's Bucket of Love and Reaction Reviews, and we back with another one. Hey, man, we about to lock right into it, man. This one right here. Street gang done took over the whole city by impregnating the prison or the female prison guards. You hear me? Type of time they on, we finna dive right on in that bit. You hear me? Lock in.
Passenger of Barbie, and I didn't mean to shit on y'all. I'm really sorry. I'm a young nigga.
In December 2022, federal agents raided the home of a Baltimore rapper named Devontae Harrison. Online, he went by YGG Tay. To his fans, he was a rising artist with tracks hitting millions of streams. But to federal prosecutors, he was something else entirely, a gangster who ran a hitman for hire ring in his city. Harrison didn't pull triggers himself. He didn't need to. He had money, connections, and access to the Black Guerrilla Family, or BGF, one of America's most dangerous prison gangs several decades old. And he used all three to orchestrate a killing spree that left at least 6 people dead.
The hit, Warren and another defendant, Wayne Prince, who attempted to carry out the murder, and Prince and an unindicted co-conspirator who instead murdered McKemmy. In all, this federal indictment now connecting Warren to nearly a dozen attempted murders and 3 murders, also including the 2018 shooting deaths of the mother and sister of a targeted rival.
Harrison would hire a hitman named David Warren, a young BGF assassin who'd been trained by top leaders in the gang and had beaten 10 murder charges by the time he was 24. It was with Warren pulling the trigger and Harrison providing the funds that the BGF would lead a murder spree in a city all too familiar with violence. But Harrison and Warren were just 2 names in a sprawling federal indictment that revealed the full scope of the Black Guerrilla family's reign of terror in Baltimore, a vicious, powerful, and highly organized prison gang that had come to the city in the early 2000s, set up shop within the prison system through clapping insecure female guards, and moved onto the streets through sacrificing rivals. It was a gang that allowed for anyone to rise up and become a kingpin if he had the right gumption and connections. And for the impoverished youth of 2000s Baltimore, who'd grown up seeing guns, heroin, and pimps, the BGF lifestyle was worth the risk of prison time, or even being shot dead in the streets. This is the story of the Black Guerrilla Family of Baltimore, how a prison gang from the other side of the country became the city's most powerful street gang.
You're not native to the area. This is the Baltimore you probably have known. The Baltimore travelers used to see passing through the city on the main arteries of routes 1 and 40. Today, of course, the main route through Baltimore takes the traveler to the outskirts of the city, then through the new exciting Harbor Tunnel.
Kurt's birthday. He turns 52 today, one day after the raid on his East Baltimore house.
Police, search warrant!
Kurt was among 20 people targeted yesterday by teams of police officers who busted their way into homes throughout East Baltimore. The raids were part of a stepped-up effort to disrupt the Black Guerrilla Family Gang, or BGF, linked to much of the city's violence.
The Black Guerrilla Family was born in 1966 at California's San Quentin State Prison during the height of the Black Power movement. Founded by George Jackson, George Lewis, and W.L. Nolan, the BGF began as something different from typical prison gangs.
Of course, here in prison, we see the repression, the exploitation, the victimization of lower class.
Inspired by Marcus Garvey and Malcolm X, they called themselves an African-American Marxist-Leninist revolutionary organization with stated goals of promoting Black power, maintaining dignity in prison, and even overthrowing the United States government. Their ideological and economic aims were laid out in what they called the Black Book, a manifesto teaching members to transform, quote, the criminal mind into a revolutionary mind, into a socio-politically conscious rebel to the level of a bona fide guerrilla. Ideology couldn't mask violence. In 1979, BGF member Edward Glenn Brooks shot former BGF lawyer Faye Stender 5 times for her alleged betrayal of George Jackson. Brooks forced her to say, "I, Faye Stender, admit, "I betrayed George Jackson and the prison movement when they needed me most." Just before pulling the trigger, Stender was left paralyzed and in constant pain. She later committed suicide in Hong Kong after testifying against Brooks. A decade later, on August 22, 1989, BGF member Tyrone Robinson fatally shot Huey P. Newton, co-founder of the Black Panther Party, outside 1456 9th Street in West Oakland. Relations between Newton and the BGF had been strained for nearly 2 decades. Many former Black Panthers who joined BGF in prison were disenchanted with Newton for his perceived abandonment of imprisoned members and his alleged crack cocaine addiction. Robinson was convicted and sentenced to 32 years. By the 1990s, the Black guerrilla family had spread eastward. They appeared in Maryland's correctional system and quickly established dominance. Unlike their California counterparts who preferred to operate covertly, the Maryland BGF adopted a street gang mentality and took control of West Baltimore with brutal efficiency.
Alright.
In 2009, Tavon White entered the Baltimore City Detention Center on an attempted murder charge. He was 25 years old. Within months, he had transformed the jail into a criminal stronghold that made international headlines. White recruited a network of correctional officers through a systematic strategy taught to new BGF members. Target women with low self-esteem, insecurities, and certain physical attributes. Seduce them, build relationships, then exploit those relationships to smuggle contraband. Male officers were corrupted through money. One guard made $3,000 to $5,000 per week smuggling contraband to a single inmate. The operation was sophisticated. Inmates paid for drugs and contraband by texting 14-digit numbers to load money onto Green Dot Money Pack prepaid debit cards. Gang leaders used these cards to pay suppliers and pocket profits. White bought a Mercedes-Benz and a BMW while incarcerated. During a slow month, he claimed to earn more than $15,000. That's more than most Americans make even today, and he did it while behind bars.
This boy made some bread, too. I mean, it ain't really...
Female guards smuggled contraband in their underwear, hair, and, well, you can imagine where else. They concealed drugs in sandwiches and hid cell phones under their clothes. Security was virtually non-existent. Guards faced cursory or no searches when entering. One federal witness estimated that between 60 and 75% of the approximately 650 correctional officers at the detention center were involved in contraband smuggling or sexual relationships with inmates. 95% of working men, inmates who performed jobs allowing greater freedom of movement, were BGF members who served as contraband couriers. They picked up goods stashed in certain areas and transported them to recipients. Without their cooperation, the smuggling scheme couldn't function.
White from an intercepted cell phone call back in January of last year when he said, quote, "This is my jail. You understand that? I'm dead serious. I make every final call in the jail." In what Assistant U.S. Attorney Robert Harding characterized as an upside-down world where inmates ran the jail, a pair of prisoners, along with 5 guards and a worker from the facility's kitchen, now face conspiracy charges.
The BGF's control extended far beyond drugs. They had their own Minister of Finance, who collected dues from members and levies from non-member inmates, funneling money to gang leaders on the streets. This secret economy was known as Jamonomics, the BGF's economic structure that was coined by its founders decades prior. Non-gang inmates who refused to pay protection money faced violence, or their families on the outside did. Hours before planned contraband searches in January 2013, an FBI affidavit revealed that word reached White from an alleged tipster, a corrections officer at the jail. This advance warning illustrated how completely the BGF had infiltrated the system. They literally controlled the prison structure in Maryland, meaning planned searches were useless. But it was sex, not drugs, that brought national attention to the Baltimore City Detention Center scandal. Tavon White had sexual relationships with 4 female correctional officers. He impregnated all 4 of them, legit fathering 5 children while incarcerated. One guard had Tavon tattooed on her neck. Another had his name tattooed on her wrist. You cannot get more absurd than this. Like, this story could have been in a TV show, and people online would have called it completely unrealistic. Federal prosecutors wrote in their indictment that, quote, "These sexual relations cemented the business ties and the association of the corrections officers with the enterprise." Another BGF member, Jamar Anderson, was involved with 5 guards. The corruption ran so deep that 75% of correctional officers at the facility were women, and according to one inmate witness, between 60 and 75% of them were involved in contraband smuggling or sexual relationships with inmates. It's actually more common than one might think for female guards to get into secret relationships at prison institutions, as well as parole officers getting into relationships with released convicts. What's not common, however, is for so many of them to brazenly and openly have relationships with one inmate who so happens to be a drug smuggling gang boss.
Carmen Hernandez on the right represents Michelle McNair, who worked in the kitchen and is accused of smuggling contraband like tobacco into the jail. Hernandez asked White, "Would you lie if you thought lying would help your sentence?" White responded, "No," and "Not under oath, I will not." He indicated he was concerned about getting more prison time. White also admitted that he ruled BCDC by force and intimidation. The defense played a phone call in which White said, "Nobody outranks me. Also, I am the law, and either you're going to do it or you're going to become the target." At times, White was extremely confident during his testimony. At others, he seemed embarrassed. When asked about choking and slapping a correctional officer at the jail, one of the mothers of his children, White said, "I grabbed her up, yes." He said he had her by the collar and was in her face. And, "I didn't literally slap the S out of her. I put my hands on her, yes." He said a correctional officer.
On April 23, 2013, federal authorities unsealed a sweeping 25-count indictment. 25 people, including 13 female correctional officers, faced racketeering, drug trafficking, and money laundering charges. The charges detailed a criminal enterprise that had been operating with impunity for years. The indictment revealed intercepted wiretaps of correctional officers discussing their criminal activities. One guard, Adrena Rice, was recorded saying, "When I came back in the jail, I'm like, shit, I'm not going to stop making my money. You feel me? I seen what the fuck was going on. Asked a few people what was up and who was who and what was what. I am just about my money. You hear me? I gotta get it." Another officer, Katara Stevenson, who had Tavon tattooed on her wrist in honor of the father of her child, was among those charged. The scandal became international news, embarrassing Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley, who had pledged to improve the prison system. Critics speculated the scandal could diminish his chances for a 2016 presidential bid. In November 2013, authorities unsealed indictments against 14 more correctional officers, bringing the total number of guards facing prison time to 27. In all, 44 people were indicted on federal charges related to the scheme. Adrena Rice became the first correctional officer sentenced, receiving 3.5 years in federal prison. In court, she stood tearfully and said, "I know what I did was wrong. I apologize for everything that I did. I know I made a messed up decision in my life." 8 other officers pleaded guilty and were sentenced over the following weeks. Tavon White eventually turned star witness for federal prosecutors, testifying for 5 days in the corruption trial against several correctional officers and other inmates. Prosecutors said his early cooperation allowed them to add another 19 names to the original indictment. In exchange for his testimony, White's federal and state prison sentences would run concurrently rather than consecutively.
And Tavon White became a key witness for the government, and it paid off today. 11 News 19 lead investigative reporter Jane Miller has that story from the federal courthouse.
On February 10th, 2015, he was sentenced to 12 years. In all, 40 defendants, including 24 correctional officers, were convicted. U.S. Attorney Rod Rosenstein told reporters, "If you're in law enforcement, if you're a correctional officer, and you get involved in supporting activities of a gang, you're going to wind up behind bars yourself." While the jail scandal grabbed headlines, the BGF's violence on Baltimore's streets was equally devastating. In November 2013, the same week authorities announced the second wave of correctional officer indictments, police and federal agents launched raids in the Greenmount area of Baltimore, going after 48 alleged BGF members and associates.
This home on Walworth Street, other teams moved in on the 10 other locations. In total, 6 people were arrested during the raids, targeting members of the Black Guerrilla family.
The commissioner started talking about BGF 1 year ago, and we are going to keep talking about them. We are going to keep arresting them. We're going to dismantle BGF operations across the city.
Investigators connected the Greenmount BGF to at least 13 murders and 12 shootings dating back to 2005. According to authorities, David Hunter had become the de facto leader of the organization, responsible for numerous killings in the Greenmount corridor. One victim stood out, Carlos Williams. His crime? He had tried to open a drug rehabilitation clinic on BGF territory. The gang saw it as a threat to their drug distribution operations.
Killed on the job early Sunday morning, leaving city police to search for his killer. 11 News reporter Carrie Kavanaugh is at city police headquarters with that story.
At this point, though, it's unclear whether his killers were waiting for him to leave for work or if he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
I feel angry that someone senselessly took my husband's life this morning.
Lisa Williams is just absorbing the shock of her husband's death. Police say 50-year-old Carlos Williams was gunned down on his way to work for Comcast just before 6 o'clock Sunday morning. It happened in the 1900 block of Boone Street. Police say Williams was approached by at least 3 suspects. After that, they're not sure what transpired, but police found Williams with multiple gunshot wounds in his Comcast work van.
At this point, we suspect that the incident happened due to an attempted robbery, but we just don't know without witnesses or suspects to tell us what we have.
Williams' family and friends are devastated. They say he'd do anything for anybody and even started a program to help recovering drug addicts get back on their feet.
He was a community activist. He believed in people. He saw the good in everybody.
He would take the shirt off his back and give it if that's what it took to help him.
Police have no suspects in Williams' murder, but his wife has some words for whomever is responsible.
Even though I'm angry, I pray that they do not rest, that they don't get no sleep, that the God just shake everything.
The BGF street operations extended throughout Baltimore. In June 2015, federal authorities indicted 14 more BGF members for violent racketeering and drug trafficking. The charges included 2 murders, 2 attempted murders, and 3 fatal drug overdoses caused by the gang's drug distribution. The gang operated drug distribution shops at strategic locations, Pratt and Payson Streets, Catherine and Baltimore Streets, and on Lemon Street. They distributed the usual street drugs at the time, like heroin, oxy, and crack. One defendant, Irvin Vincent, allegedly caused the deaths of the 3 customers who died from heroin, oxy, morphine, and fent intoxication in 2013 and 2014. Timothy Michael Gray allegedly sanctioned the murder of a BGF gang member in 2013, then watched as another member fired several shots at the victim. Gray also authorized the shooting of a 3rd victim, and in June 2015 ordered the murder of someone known only as Gutter. Hit after hit, accompanied by their brazen public slinging, led to the end of their street operation. By June 2015, U.S. Attorney Rod Rosenstein proudly announced that federal authorities had indicted 118 alleged BGF members and associates since 2009.
That's a lot of people, man. That's a lot of people, for real.
The BGF's power structure in the city's streets was held up like it was in the prison system, through infiltration.
A guilty plea that is raising eyebrows across the state. 2 Black Guerrilla family gang members plead guilty to federal racketeering charges.
Now, the bizarre twist, prosecutors saying the pair conducted gang activity while working out of a Safe Streets office. Rick joins us now with more. Rick?
Well, guys, for years, many have questioned how effective the Safe Streets program is. And look, there's no doubt about it. This is a major blow to the program. Prosecutors say the 2 gang members sold drugs and held meetings at the Safe Streets offices, even orchestrated murders.
Take a good look at 38-year-old Ricky Evans, a top leader in the BGF. Authorities say hid behind his role in the Safe Streets program to carry out a slew of violent crimes.
BGF is one of the most powerful and most violent gangs here in Baltimore City.
Prosecutors say Evans worked out of the Safe Streets office along the 2300 block of Monument Street, where he held BGF meetings and used it to store and distribute both drugs and firearms.
These circumstances, they're really disturbing, and clearly there was a failure of vetting.
Even conducting a murder-for-hire scheme.
Actually arranging for other BGF members to go out and kill people that he had authorized the murders of.
38-year-old Sean Thomas pled guilty to the racketeering charges as well. Authorities say Thomas collected gang dues, sold drugs through controlled open-air drug shops in East Baltimore, and ordered the hit of a rival gang.
The BGF controlled the Baltimore's Safe Streets program, a violence intervention initiative designed to reduce gang violence by employing reformed gang members as mediators. Federal search warrants obtained in October 2010 revealed the BGF's strategy. According to confidential informants, high-ranking gang leaders hoped that working with Safe Streets would give them legitimacy in the eyes of law enforcement and the public. Todd Duncan exemplified this strategy. While serving as a youth counselor for the violence intervention nonprofit community Organized to Improve Life, or COIL, federal authorities said Duncan also served as the BGF's street leader. At the time of his arrest, COIL was operating the second-ever Safe Streets location in Baltimore's Union Square neighborhood. Ricky Evans, another high-ranking BGF leader, worked for the Safe Streets program in 2015. Federal authorities raided the Safe Streets East location on East Monument Street and discovered it was being used as a BGF meeting place and stash house for drugs and firearms. Federal prosecutors wrote that they had witnesses who'd identified the majority of Safe Streets staff as BGF members. Evans was arrested in November 2016 while picking up drugs in Virginia. Federal prosecutors accused him of operating a murder-for-hire scheme and authorizing gang members to commit violence. Among the charges, Evans authorized the kidnapping and extortion of 33-year-old Marcal Walton, who was shot and killed in January 2010. That same year, prosecutors said, he authorized the murder of Daryl Alston, a fellow gang member suspected of cooperating with law enforcement. Evans eventually became a star federal informant, secretly cooperating with authorities for 7 years before finally being sentenced in October 2025. The prosecutor on his case compared Evans's cooperation to flipping a top shot caller in the mafia. Their control over Safe Streets continued after the bust-up, and there is corruption within the organization to this day.
Sandtown Winchester represents 72 blocks of just about every urban ill. A neighborhood challenged by poverty, poor health, substance abuse, and violent crime. City and federal officials believe this is a community where Safe Streets program will make a difference.
The gang's infiltration of the city's systems had allowed them to become one of the most prominent gangs in Baltimore. In January 2015, a 29-year-old named Jason Armstrong entered a police station on Argonne Drive with a hidden .22 caliber and several bags of drugs. Police apprehended him due to his suspicious behavior, and he told them that BGF members had forced him to surveil the station's security system.
What happened, Chris?
At this hour, police have still not released the name of the suspect in this case. Around 8:45 this morning, they say he walked into the Northeast District Police Station with drugs and a loaded handgun. Now, he was quickly taken into custody, and when he was, police began interviewing him. Police say that the man told them that members of the Black Gorilla Family Street Gang had forced him to come inside the police station for the purpose of probing it and finding out what kind of security they had inside this particular police district. So they've issued a warning to all their police districts and, in fact, to all the police agencies in the Mid-Atlantic area to make sure that they know that this warning is out there, that Black Gorilla family members have now sent an actual suspect into a police station with a loaded weapon.
Meanwhile, Baltimore's public enemy number one for a number of years was a BGF killer. In the summer of 2013, Daryl Martin Anderson went on a gang-killing spree. At 25 years old, with distinctive dreadlocks, forehead tattoos, and a thoroughbred tattoo across his chest, Anderson was everything the Black Gorilla family had become: ruthless, brazen, and utterly fearless. He was a full-on hitman. In July 2012, Anderson shot and killed 31-year-old Derek Gamble as he sat in his vehicle outside TB's bar in Parkville. Then he fled the scene. Anderson was also tied to a triple homicide related to a friend. Tierra Fallon was feuding with a woman named Bishop in East Baltimore. That night, Fallon summoned Anderson to Bishop's house in the 3300 block of Elmora Avenue, where 8 people were gathered on the porch. Witnesses testified to Fallon's command.
What Fallon is saying, she left and a few minutes later returned, police say, with Daryl Anderson and another man. She pointed to the house and directed the man next to her to do what you all do, according to the documents.
Anderson opened fire on the porch. 8 people scrambled for cover. 3 were hit. Jenny Sherd, only 20 at the time, was killed instantly. Sierra Williams, 24, was shot in the head and critically wounded. Michelle Hitchens, a 51-year-old, was shot in the arm, a seemingly non-fatal wound, but died days later from an embolism. 3 days later, Anderson committed a home invasion in the 5800 block of Moore's Run Court, shooting 2 men and injuring a third. Baltimore police then dubbed Anderson public enemy number 1 and plastered his face everywhere. But Anderson didn't care. Despite being the most wanted man in the city, he didn't alter his appearance. Deputy U.S. Marshal David Lutz revealed that Anderson walked around Baltimore neighborhoods brandishing a handgun with his shirt off, deliberately displaying his chest tattoo. Their control over the streets, the Safe Streets program, and infiltration into Baltimore's police and prison system allowed for this kind of bravado. In July 2013, U.S. Marshals tracked Anderson to Birmingham, Alabama. When they surrounded an apartment complex, a woman emerged claiming he wasn't inside. Moments later, Anderson appeared with his hands up. Inside, authorities found a .40 caliber Glock and 2 bulletproof vests. Through 2 murder trials, Anderson was described as a perfect gentleman, pleasant, articulate, and cooperative. However, it was an act. Convicted in both cases, Anderson was sentenced to life plus 35 years for Gamble's murder, then life plus 240 years for the triple shooting. At his final sentencing on March 24, 2015, Anderson thanked the judge. Then, rising to be shackled, he flashed a smile and extended a middle finger towards State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby. Anderson was 27 years old, and he was just one of dozens of BGF enforcers terrorizing Baltimore, one soldier in an army that had transformed a revolutionary organization into the city's most dangerous criminal enterprise.
Warren was later arrested after investigators say he was found to be in possession of the gun that killed McKemmy. But no one has been charged with his murder until now. This federal indictment details it was Harrison who ordered the hit, Warren and another defendant, Wayne Prince, who attempted to carry out the murder, and Prince and an unindicted co-conspirator who instead murdered McKemmy.
On December 19, 2022, federal authorities announced indictments that revealed another disturbing chapter in the BGF's reign of terror. 6 alleged members, including Baltimore rapper Devontae Harrison, were charged with racketeering conspiracy involving 6 killings, 11 non-fatal shootings, attempted robberies, drug dealing, and witness intimidation. According to the indictment, Harrison partnered with the BGF around 2014 to supply heroin and cocaine to street-level drug shops. On June 28, 2014, Harrison allegedly paid $10,000 to a BGF member to kill 21-year-old Terrell Jarrett in Pigtown because he owed money for drugs Harrison had provided on consignment. But Harrison's most notorious partnership was with David Warren, a BGF assassin who by age 24 had collected 10 different attempted murder charges and a murder conspiracy charge, all of which were dropped or resulted in acquittals. Federal authorities say Harrison contracted with Warren in 2018, bragging on Instagram that he had just signed the top shooter in the city to a deal. Warren had been groomed by Ricky Evans, the BGF higher-up who worked at Safe Streets. Evans was a BGF higher-up who groomed Warren to be this nasty, violent guy. Retired Baltimore Police Sergeant Joseph Landsman told reporters, and he was doing the exact same thing. He had these younger underlings doing all the shit for him. Harrison first paid Warren to target a BGF member who burglarized Harrison's home in November 2013. After the man was shot, Warren sent a text message that read, "Job."
And you know what I'm talking about, but I ain't gonna do you like that. And put the ad on there, you hear me?
2 months later, Harrison threatened to retaliate against 2 members of a rival organization who went on Instagram Live and accused Harrison of cooperating with law enforcement. On the morning of April 4th, 2018, Warren and unindicted co-conspirators went looking for one of the men, Rayton Benjamin, at a home on Gorman Avenue. What happened next was horrifying. Warren demanded that Benjamin's mother, 43-year-old Shanette Neal, and his sister, 21-year-old Justice Allen, call Benjamin and summon him to the home. When he didn't pick up, Warren executed both women. A 16-year-old relative who witnessed the horror addressed the court years later. "I was 12 at the time, looking over my shoulder every day." Warren's violence continued. He was involved in the killing of Brian McKemmy, a 27-year-old contractor who was simply working on a gang rival's Northeast Baltimore home when it was shot up. McKemmy's father, Scott, told the court, "A little bit of justice was served today after Warren was sentenced to 45 years in federal prison in September 2024. Harrison pleaded guilty in July 2024 and was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison." U.S. Senior District Judge James K. Breiter called the hit squad depraved and dangerous.
Look, I'm not gonna cap, man. Look, they was organized. They was real organized, man. I ain't gonna lie. You know, but you know what they say, all great things come to an end. I mean, you had the female prison guards knocked up. A few of them. You know? So, I ain't gonna lie, they had a lot of structure. And there had to be a lot of loyalty. But eventually, and I do mean eventually, there's always a crack. There's always a leak. There's always a hole. It's always a nigga who gonna fold. See what I'm saying? Well, you know, it's like a revolving door, you know. In the streets, you get what the streets gonna give you. You know. But y'all let me know how y'all feel down below. Let me know. You know what I mean? Let me know if we gonna buck it or we gonna love it. But I'm gonna leave that to y'all.